My gold digger girlfriend called me a broke loser for 2 years, then I showed her the million-dollar business I'd been running in secret. Sometimes the best way to find out who someone really is involves letting them think you're exactly who they want to judge you as being. I learned this lesson the hard way after 2 relationships that taught me money changes everything about how people see you, and not always in ways you'd expect. I'm Ryan, 29, and for the past 5 years I've been running what most people would call a dropshipping empire, though I prefer thinking of it as my digital real estate portfolio. The numbers are honestly ridiculous. I'm pulling in close to $2 million annually across multiple product lines, mostly home fitness equipment and tech accessories. I've got automated systems running 24/7, a team of virtual assistants handling customer service, and investment properties in 3 states. But after my last girlfriend started treating me like her personal ATM the moment she found out about my bank account, and the one before that suddenly became intimidated and weird around me, I decided to try a different approach. I wanted to meet someone who'd like me for who I am, not what I could buy them. So when my buddy Jake invited me to his pool party in Orlando last summer, I showed up in my carefully maintained 2015 Toyota Camry instead of my BMW. I was wearing a faded graphic tee and board shorts I'd bought specifically for occasions like this, playing the part of someone who might actually struggle to make rent. The apartment I'd rented for this exact purpose was a modest 1-bedroom in a decent but unremarkable complex, furnished with IKEA basics and a single gaming console. I'd even created a portfolio of mediocre graphic design work and business cards that listed freelance rates embarrassingly low enough to make people feel sorry for me. That's where I met Amber, this gorgeous 26-year-old yoga instructor with sun-streaked hair and the kind of smile that made every guy at the party gravitate toward her general vicinity. She was wearing this flowing sundress that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget, but she seemed genuinely interested when I told her I was a struggling freelance designer trying to build my client base. "That's so cool that you're following your creative passion," she said, touching my arm in that way that makes your brain temporarily forget how to form coherent sentences. Most guys I meet are so obsessed with money and status symbols. It's refreshing to find someone who values artistic expression over material success. I should have recognized the irony in that statement, but I was too busy being charmed by how she laughed at my jokes and seemed fascinated by my stories about difficult clients and tight deadlines. When she asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, mentioning this little place she knew that had amazing lattes for under $5, I thought I'd finally found someone who appreciated simplicity. We exchanged numbers, and I watched her program my contact as Ryan, Artist Guy, with a little paint palette emoji. As I drove home in my deliberately modest car, I felt optimistic about finding genuine connection with someone who seemed to value character over cash flow, completely unaware that I was about to spend the next 2 years learning exactly how wrong first impressions can be. Those first 8 months with Amber were honestly magical, and I started wondering if I'd been overthinking the whole money situation with my previous relationships. We fell into this beautiful routine of budget-friendly dates that felt more romantic than any expensive restaurant I'd ever been to, long walks on Cocoa Beach where we'd collect shells and talk about everything from childhood dreams to conspiracy theories about whether dolphins are actually aliens. I'd pick her up in my Camry and we'd drive to this little taco truck near downtown Orlando, splitting a $10 meal and laughing until our stomachs hurt. She seemed genuinely happy sitting on my IKEA couch eating ramen I'd doctored up with actual vegetables and sriracha, curled against me while we binge-watched Netflix shows I'd never heard of but pretended to love because she got so excited explaining the plot twists. The whole performance was surprisingly easy to maintain because I'd actually started enjoying the simplicity of it all. There's something liberating about not having to worry about impressing someone with expensive gestures. I'd set up this elaborate system where I'd work on fake graphic design projects in coffee shops, hunched over my laptop with mock client emails pulled up on the screen while actually managing my business empire through apps on my phone. Between sips of overpriced lattes, I'd be approving product launches, reviewing profit margins, and coordinating with suppliers, all while Amber thought I was struggling to design logos for local businesses that paid me barely enough to cover rent. She'd often bring me coffee during these sessions, kissing my forehead and telling me how proud she was of my dedication to my craft, completely oblivious that I'd just closed a deal worth more than most people's annual salary. Her Instagram during this period was filled with these genuine posts about finding joy in simple moments. Photos of our beach walks with captions about how happiness doesn't require expensive things. Pictures of our home-cooked meals with hashtags about authentic love and real connections. I actually screenshotted some of them because they seemed so heartfelt. This beautiful documentation of someone who'd apparently found contentment with a struggling artist. But around month 6, I started noticing subtle shifts that made my stomach clench with familiar dread. She began following these luxury lifestyle influencers, spending longer scrolling through feeds filled with designer handbags and exotic vacation destinations. I'd catch her staring at posts of couples in first-class airplane seats or standing in front of expensive cars, and when I'd ask what she was looking at, she'd quickly close the app and say, "Nothing important." The comments started small, observations about how her friend Jessica's boyfriend had surprised her with weekend trips to Miami, or how another friend had gotten a promotion that allowed her to finally shop somewhere other than Target. "I'm not saying I need expensive things," she'd clarify whenever I raised an eyebrow. "I just think it would be nice to have a little more security, you know? Maybe not worry so much about splitting every single bill down to the penny." I nodded along, fighting the urge to tell her that security wasn't actually an issue, watching as the woman who'd once posted about finding happiness in simple moments slowly began looking around our simple life with what seemed increasingly like disappointment. Right around our 1-year anniversary, Derek entered the conversation, and suddenly I understood why Amber had seemed increasingly restless with our budget-friendly lifestyle. Derek was her ex-boyfriend, a real estate agent who'd apparently treated her like absolute royalty during their 8-month relationship 2 years prior, and according to Amber's increasingly frequent stories, he'd set some kind of impossible standard for how men should treat women they care about. Derek used to surprise me with dinner reservations at places that required actual dress codes, she mentioned casually while we were eating Chinese takeout on my couch, scrolling through photos of some upscale steakhouse on her phone. He understood that experiences matter, that making memories requires actually investing in them instead of just hoping Netflix and Ken Soup counts as romance. The Derek stories became a regular soundtrack to our relationship, each one delivered with this wistful tone that made me feel like I was constantly being measured against some ghost who'd apparently never heard of a budget. According to Amber, Derek had whisked her away for spontaneous weekend trips to Key West, where they'd stayed at boutique hotels and eaten at restaurants where appetizers cost more than our entire grocery budget. He'd surprised her with jewelry for no reason other than seeing something that reminded him of her, and had this amazing ability to pick out designer handbags that perfectly matched her personality and style. "I'm not saying you need to be exactly like him," she'd always add after these stories, but her tone suggested that actually, yes, that's exactly what she was saying. "I just think there's something to be said for a man who isn't afraid to show how much his girlfriend means to him through actions, not just words." The passive-aggressive suggestions about my career became more frequent and pointed, usually delivered while she was looking at job listings on her laptop with this concerned expression that made me want to laugh. "Have you ever thought about going back to school for business administration?" she asked one evening, showing me degree programs at local colleges. "I mean, freelance work is fine for now, but what about our future? What about when we want to buy a house or start a family? You can't support a real life on logo design gigs that pay $200. She started sending me job postings for corporate graphic design positions at companies that offered health insurance and retirement plans, always with messages like, "Just thought this might be interesting," or "Doesn't hurt to look at options." The implication was clear. My current career path was a dead end that any serious adult would have already abandoned in favor of something more stable and respectable. Through mutual friends, I eventually learned the real story about Derek, which added a delicious layer of irony to Amber's constant comparisons. Apparently, he'd dumped her rather brutally for a wealthy client he'd met while showing million-dollar properties, telling Amber that she was fun for now, but not someone he could see himself building a serious future with. The expensive dinners and weekend getaways had been his way of keeping her entertained while he shopped around for someone who matched his actual ambitions, and when he found his upgrade, he'd discarded Amber without a second thought. She'd never told me this part of the story, preferring to paint their relationship as some kind of romantic ideal that had ended due to timing rather than Derek's calculated cruelty, but knowing the truth made her constant praise of his generosity feel even more pathetic and misguided. By month 18, Amber's dissatisfaction with our lifestyle had evolved from subtle hints into full-blown campaigns for me to completely restructure my life around her vision of what a successful relationship should look like. She'd started following Instagram accounts of couples who documented their expensive date nights and luxury vacations, constantly showing me posts with captions like, "When your man knows your worth," attached to photos of women wearing jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. "Look at how Madison's boyfriend surprised her for their 6-month anniversary," she'd say, shoving her phone in my face to display photos of some elaborate dinner setup at a rooftop restaurant overlooking downtown Miami. He rented the entire private dining room and had them spell out her name in rose petals. That's what it looks like when someone actually prioritizes romance. The job listings she sent became more aggressive and frequent, accompanied by increasingly blunt commentary about my apparent lack of ambition and unwillingness to provide the kind of stability she deserved. This marketing position at Universal Studios comes with full benefits and a starting salary of $65,000, she announced one morning, already dressed for her yoga classes while I pretended to work on a logo design for a fictional bakery. That's real money, Ryan. Money that could actually build something meaningful instead of this paycheck-to-paycheck existence we're stuck in. She'd started openly criticizing my career choice in front of her friends, treating our financial situation like some embarrassing secret she couldn't wait to escape. During a dinner with her yoga instructor colleagues, she spent 20 minutes explaining how she was helping me transition into a more sustainable career path, because freelance work was basically just unemployment with extra steps. When one of her friends mentioned her boyfriend's recent promotion to regional manager at a pharmaceutical company, Amber sighed dramatically and said, "Must be nice to date someone who actually has professional goals beyond hoping their next client doesn't try to negotiate down from $200. The breaking point came during what was supposed to be a romantic dinner at this mid-range Italian place I'd chosen specifically because it fell within my carefully maintained broke freelancer budget. Instead of enjoying our meal, Amber spent the entire evening scrolling through her phone, showing me photos of engagement rings her friend Brittany had been texting her. Brittany's fiancé spent 3 months' salary on this ring, she said, holding up a photo of some massive diamond that probably cost more than most people's down payment on a house. He took out a loan to make sure she got exactly what she deserved, because that's what men do when they're serious about building a future with someone. She set her phone down and looked at me with this expression of complete exasperation, like she was a teacher dealing with a particularly slow student who refused to grasp basic concepts. "I need you to understand something, Ryan. I'm 26 years old. I'm not getting any younger, and I'm not going to waste my prime years waiting for someone to figure out that love requires actual investment, not just good intentions and Netflix subscriptions." That's when she delivered the ultimatum that would ultimately reveal exactly who she really was underneath all the yoga-inspired philosophy about finding happiness in simple moments. "I need you to apply for a loan and buy me a proper engagement ring, something that shows you're serious about our relationship and our future together. Because honestly, I'm embarrassed to tell people we're together when you can't even afford to take me somewhere that requires reservations." The text that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting in my usual coffee shop, supposedly working on a logo design for a fictional pet grooming business but actually finalizing the biggest deal of my career, a partnership with a major fitness equipment manufacturer that would net me close to $200,000 over the next 6 months. I was reviewing profit projections and coordinating with my fulfillment team when my phone buzzed with a message that made me realize this elaborate test had finally reached its natural conclusion. "Ryan, I can't do this anymore. You're a pathetic loser who will never amount to anything, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise." Derek was right when he said some people are just meant to stay small, and that's exactly what you are: small, unambitious, and completely clueless about what it takes to build a real life with someone. I've wasted 2 years waiting for you to grow up and become the kind of man I actually deserve, but you're never going to change because you don't even understand what success looks like. I need someone who can provide actual security, not someone who gets excited about splitting a $12 pizza and thinks that counts as romance. You're going to spend your entire life making excuses for why you can't afford the things that matter, and I refused to settle for that kind of mediocre existence anymore. The message continued for another paragraph, but I'd stopped reading after "pathetic loser," because that's when everything clicked into place with perfect clarity. This wasn't about my career or our future or even the engagement ring. This was about Amber revealing exactly who she'd been all along, someone who measured love in dollar signs and viewed relationships as transactional arrangements where affection could be purchased with expensive gestures. I felt this weird sense of relief washing over me, like I'd been holding my breath for 2 years and could finally exhale. The woman who'd once posted Instagram stories about finding happiness in simple moments had just called me a pathetic loser for living the exact lifestyle she'd claimed to value, and the irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh out loud. My laptop screen was still displaying real-time sales figures that showed my business generating more money in a single day than most people made in a month. And here was Amber texting me about how I'd never amount to anything because I couldn't afford to take her to restaurants that required reservations. I'd been waiting for this moment without even realizing it, the point where her mask would slip completely and she'd show me exactly what she thought of the person she believed me to be. Instead of getting angry or hurt, I felt this calm satisfaction that comes from seeing a long-term experiment reach its logical conclusion. The test was over, and the results were exactly what I'd suspected they would be. I typed back a simple response that would set up the revelation I'd been planning for months. Your math is wrong. Then I closed my laptop, finished my coffee, and started mentally preparing for the conversation that would either destroy Amber's entire worldview or confirm everything I'd learned about what happens when people mistake material possessions for genuine connection. Either way, tomorrow was going to be extremely educational for both of us. I invited Amber over the next evening under the pretense of having a serious conversation about our future, knowing full well she was planning to deliver some final breakup speech about needing a man who could actually provide for her properly. She arrived wearing this designer outfit I'd never seen before, probably borrowed from one of her friends for the occasion, looking like she was dressed for a business meeting rather than a relationship conversation. Ryan, we really need to talk about where this is going, she began, settling onto my IKEA couch with the kind of dramatic sigh that suggested she'd rehearsed this entire scene. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I need in a partner, and I don't think we're compatible long-term. I nodded calmly, opening my laptop and turning the screen toward her. Before you continue, I want to show you something that might change your perspective on our compatibility. The confusion on her face was absolutely priceless as she stared at my business dashboard displaying real-time sales figures, profit margins, and revenue streams that were updating every few seconds with numbers that made her monthly yoga instructor salary look like pocket change. What am I looking at? She asked, leaning forward to study the screen with growing bewilderment. This is my actual job, I said, pulling up bank statements that showed deposits ranging from $20,000 to $60,000, investment portfolios worth more than most people's houses, and business accounts that had processed millions of dollars in transactions over the past year. I run a dropshipping empire that generates close to $2 million annually, plus I've got real estate investments in Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina that provide additional passive income streams. Her mouth literally fell open as I showed her photos of my actual car, a BMW i8 that was currently parked in a garage across town, and screenshots of property deeds for the investment homes I'd purchased over the past 3 years. You've been calling me a pathetic loser who will never amount to anything while I've been running a multi-million-dollar business from my phone, I continued, watching her face cycle through disbelief, shock, and what looked like genuine horror. Every time you suggested I get a real job, I was managing inventory for product lines that generate more profit in a month than most corporate positions pay in a year. The questions came tumbling out in this desperate rush as she tried to process what she was seeing. But why would you pretend to be broke? Why live in this apartment? Why drive that car? This doesn't make any sense. I explained the whole strategy, how I'd learned from previous relationships that money changes everything, how I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I was rather than what I could buy them, how her reaction to my perceived poverty had revealed exactly what kind of person she really was underneath all the spiritual yoga instructor philosophy. You called me your financial safety net, I reminded her, pulling up our old text conversations where she'd criticized my lack of ambition and compared me unfavorably to Derek. You said I was embarrassing to be seen with because I couldn't afford expensive restaurants. You literally demanded I take out a loan to buy you an engagement ring to prove I was serious about our future. The desperate apologies started immediately, along with frantic attempts to salvage a relationship she'd just discovered was worth millions more than she'd ever imagined. Ryan, I had no idea. I'm so sorry, I never meant any of those things. I was just scared about our future and didn't know how to express my concerns properly, but I could see in her eyes that she wasn't sorry for hurting me. She was terrified about losing access to a lifestyle upgrade she'd never even known was available. I ended things with Amber that night despite her increasingly desperate pleas, watching her cycle through every manipulation tactic in the book as she realized the magnitude of what she'd just lost through her own cruelty and gold-digging behavior. You can't be serious about throwing away 2 years over a misunderstanding, she sobbed, but I calmly explained that there was no misunderstanding. She'd shown me exactly who she was when she thought I couldn't provide the lifestyle she wanted, and that person wasn't someone I could ever trust with my heart or my future. 3 months later, I reconnected with Luna, who'd been Amber's roommate during the first year of our relationship and had always been genuinely kind to me regardless of my perceived financial situation. Luna was this sweet elementary school teacher who'd laugh at my terrible jokes while Amber rolled her eyes, who'd ask thoughtful questions about my fake graphic design projects because she was actually interested in creative processes, and who'd never once made me feel like I needed to prove my worth through expensive gestures or material possessions. She'd always treated me like I mattered as a person, whether she thought I was broke or successful, and when I finally told her the truth about my business and the elaborate test I'd been running, her reaction was to burst out laughing and say, "That explains why you always seemed so confident for someone who was supposedly struggling to pay rent." Our relationship developed naturally over shared interests and genuine compatibility rather than financial calculations. Luna was impressed by my business success but not in a way that changed how she saw me as a person, and she showed the same caring, supportive nature whether we were eating ramen at my fake apartment or dining at expensive restaurants I could actually afford. Meanwhile, Amber had completely spiraled into social media stalking and increasingly pathetic attempts to win me back, sending messages through mutual friends about how she'd learned her lesson and would never judge someone's worth by their bank account again, which was ironic considering she was literally trying to get back with me because of my bank account. She tried to sabotage my relationship with Luna by spreading rumors that I was some kind of manipulative sociopath who enjoyed deceiving women, but the plan backfired spectacularly when our entire friend group realized she was essentially admitting to being a gold digger who'd treated me horribly until she discovered I was wealthy. The final nail in her reputation's coffin came when Jake, the friend who'd hosted the pool party where we met, publicly called her out at his birthday party for trying to spread lies about me after spending 2 years treating me like garbage. "You called him a pathetic loser who would never amount to anything, and now you're mad that he turned out to be more successful than anyone you'll ever date again," he announced in front of everyone, effectively ending any sympathy she might have gotten from our mutual friends. Luna and I have been together for 8 months now, and the difference is absolutely night and day. She appreciates my ambition and business success, but she fell for me when she thought I was just some struggling artist with a good sense of humor and a kind heart, which means I know her feelings are genuine rather than transactional. Last week, I finally showed her my real apartment, the BMW, and took her on our first truly expensive vacation to the Bahamas, and her reaction was pure joy at sharing new experiences together rather than validation that she'd finally landed someone who could fund her Instagram lifestyle dreams.